Special thanks to Cars of Somerset for providing the Golf R32 in this review, of course, and as I always like to do, I've dropped a link to their stock page and website contact details down in the video description, so if you want to check out their current stock, which in the case of this dealership changes very regularly, or even commission them to find you a car, of course, that is the link to find all of that info. When it comes to the modern hot hatch era, and when I say modern, I mean basically everything from 2005 onward, there are a handful of cars which are the most iconic ones that boy racers and even some older drivers now who loved these cars when they were teens but couldn't afford one really love. Golf R32s, Ford Focus STs and RSs, Vauxhall Astra VXRs, and probably my personal favourite, at least from a visual perspective, the Renault Megane R26, and just the Cup in general. When it comes to this one though, I must admit, I've always had a thing for the Golf R32. And the reason why is because it appeals to a lot of the sensibilities that I have in cars. And funnily enough, sensibilities which I didn't even know I would have back when I was a kid, looking at these cars when they first came out. And that is that I love, of course, big, lazy, torquey power, and this offers that. This is in effect the muscle car of hot hatches. It's a much larger engine than it ever realistically needs. I mean, if any hot hatch has a bigger engine than a Clio V6, that should tell you something. This one does, a 3.2 litre naturally aspirated VR6 engine, and I can't tell you how disappointed I was when Volkswagen introduced the Golf R, the R20, if you will, because it only has a 2 litre engine. I was so disappointed because the Mark IV, which I love the look of, and the Mark V R32s, they're great cars in terms of offering just beefy, raw engine. Too much engine, some people may argue, but that's one of the questions I want to answer. Is this engine too much for the task? Because after all, Volkswagen kind of has a knack for putting massive engines which you wouldn't typically expect, into their cars. Just look at my previous experience with Volkswagen. My first car was the 5 litre V10 Touareg, which is a diesel on top of all that, so it's a crazy engine, but I adored that car. It was absolutely fantastic. So could it work here, having this oversized engine? Well, to cut a long story short, hell yes it does. I absolutely love this car, and I still would love to get my hands on a Mark IV as well, but I have a nagging suspicion that I would probably still prefer the way this one drives because of a number of those refinements. Now, it uses a more modified version of that same basic VR6 engine that the Mark IV had. It has more power, just under 250 horsepower, 236 pound-feet of torque, which is 320 Newton meters for those curious. But, for full exposure, this car is not stock, and one of the reasons why I was still keen to use it for this review instead of sourcing a completely stock one is because, if nothing else, a modified car, as long as it's done tastefully and not, to 1,000 horsepower or something, it will still give you a good idea of that underlying vehicle, but crucially, and let's be honest, a lot of people who buy one are probably thinking this at the very least, it gives you a strong idea of the potential that that car has. Because most people who want something like a Golf R32 are, come on, let's admit it, boy racers at heart. And again, I talked about this in my Audi S3 review, which of course is a great rival to this car, so check out that one if you haven't already. But I believe that the boy racer phenomena is more of an effect than a category of person. I believe that no matter what age you are, if you drive a car which is like this, it will just turn you into a boy racer because it just delivers that kind of impulse. I found myself braking later, deliberately downshifting to make it pop and bang and just overtaking people when I didn't need to, because it's just what the car makes you want to do, and it's a weird effect. Again, I've referenced multiple times on the channel the reason why. If you have, for instance, in the motorcycle world, a little learner legal 125 compared to a top-of-the-line MotoGP race bike, give those two bikes to somebody and let them take them around the track for a few laps. Chances are, if you look at the telemetry, they'll spend more of their time at full throttle in the lesser powered bike. And the reason why is obvious. When you've got less power, you can use more of it. And that's the beauty of a hot hatch. Because they are slower than a sports car or a supercar, you can use more of it. Especially in the UK, there's a reason why I call these B-road ballers. That's where these cars come alive. They don't need straight-line drag races or autobahns to enjoy them. In fact, those are some of the least enjoyable things to do with these cars. It's all about the cornering. It's about the sound, the grip, that compact size and weight that most GTs, at least, or most sports cars can't really match. They tend to be a lot bigger, often a lot heavier, and even though they are quote-unquote faster, they sometimes, funnily enough, don't necessarily feel faster. Now, in the case of this one, as I said, it is modified. Most notably, it's supercharged to around 350 horsepower, which again gives me a crazy idea of how good this could be if you chose to do the same thing, because stock, the 0 to 60 ranges from 6 to 6.5 seconds, depending on the gearbox option and gearbox use. You can, for those who are wondering, have it with a conventional manual or an auto with paddles, which of course is the one that I'm using, because I prefer that. And in terms of usability, well, it's a hatchback. So of course you've got 3-door or 5-door options. It has the part-time all-wheel drive, as you'd expect from a Volkswagen like this. So in terms of all-weather ability, practicality, it's got all those boxes ticked. In terms of fuel, obviously being a bigger engine could be a huge disadvantage there, but it's actually not bad. The official numbers are 19 in the city, 34 to the gallon on the highway, and 26 average. And when I checked out Honest John to get the aggregated scores of actual owners, they do get 26 out of it. So that's accurate to real life. The high 20 region, if you're careful, drop into the lower 20s for sure if you drive it as, let's be honest, most of us will. In terms of space, this is something which could easily be a demerit for obvious reasons. You know, I'm not a small person, so sitting in a hot hatch could easily be very uncomfortable for me. But spoiler alert, I've got a review for a Mercedes C63 AMG coming out in a couple of days on the channel, and I was more comfortable in this Golf, at least in terms of space. You can't adjust the seat that much, so it's kind of essential that you have good headroom. And the headroom was great. The legroom is good. The width room is a little bit narrower, of course, than a sports car would be, but I was never uncomfortable in this thing. The steering is super responsive, and again, the modified suspension, the lower ride height, etc. does play a factor in that. And even in terms of the sound that you heard at the start, that you can hear here, having the upgraded exhaust makes a huge difference. So across the board, it's all these little refinements and updates and modifications that take a car which is already good or great and make it fantastic. Personally, with these modifications, or similar ones that you could do yourself if you were to buy a Golf or really any hot hatch, you can turn a vehicle that is in general circumstances cool but maybe fairly common. You know, you see a lot of Ford Focus STs, for example, or a lot of Astra VXRs. You could take it from being that to something really special, and this feels very special. It has performance which, of course, I don't know for sure, but with a 350 horsepower supercharged option, I would guess that 0 to 60, especially with the DSG, is probably more like the low 5-second region, and it definitely feels it. It's very quick, and it has, I guess I'd describe it as a sprightliness that most of the cars that I would usually drive don't have. I like big, heavy GT-style machines, Nissan GTRs, Jag XKRs, Astons. I love those kind of cars, and they are basically my favourites in terms of cars that I actually want to own. But even I will admit, as a lover of those vehicles, this has at least as much of the fun factor, especially once again with modifications like these that make it louder, sharper and faster, on a much, much lower budget. Now, speaking to that budget, how much is one of these actually going to cost you? Well, depending on a couple of factors, the three most notable ones being, of course, the mileage, whether you get a 3-door or a 5-door makes a difference, and also the manual or auto makes a difference, so spec it as you will. You can actually pretty much pay as much as you want to pay on one of these, because you can buy an earlier one, and incidentally they ran from about 2005 to 2009, entered the US in 2007. You can start in the UK at about £4,700, which is dirt cheap for something this good with this much raw potential. But the crazy thing is, you can pay up to 20 grand for one of these Golf R32s if you want to get a really, really low mileage car. That brings us to a crucial question, and a question which I always like to pretty much end these reviews with, and that is, what kind of issues can they have? Is it worth the risk of having an otherwise relatively affordable hatchback, but with a potentially very complicated, troublesome engine? Well, interestingly, most of the issues that these do have don't tend to be engine related, and that seems to be a common theme with cars that I like. The 4 things, when I was looking at owners' forums and common issues that these Golfs seem to suffer from, is having noisy strut mounts on the suspension, broken or breaking engine mounts, coolant leaks occasionally, and most commonly issues, faults, or at the very least false error codes to do with the door locks. So in other words, it's a Volkswagen. So it's very similar to the kind of issues I would have in my Touareg. I had some locking issues, mostly battery related issues. So that kind of thing isn't a surprise. It's, as I said, a Volkswagen after all, and in the grand scheme of things, they're not the most expensive things to repair most of the time. They can be annoying, of course, anything's annoying when it breaks, but in terms of, for example, comparing these kind of running costs to an actual sports car or a GT, well, it's going to cost you a whole lot less, but you get a lot of what those cars can offer. You get the noise, you get the acceleration, you get all-wheel drive, which a lot of those don't have, and of course, as many of you know, I'm a huge fan of that. You get fantastic handling, excellent cornering ability, and of course the modifications play a role in this, but it's not even just a hot hatch thing, because with these modifications, I like this way more than the Audi S3. The Audi was a really nice car. This is a fantastic little car, and I was hoping it would be great. And for me, entering a review with those kind of expectations are typically a good way to be disappointed. See, my expectations for a high-performance Volkswagen are through the roof, because my first car was one, and I absolutely adored it. It was great. It's one of the most unique SUVs on the market. So this could have easily disappointed me, but I'm glad to say it didn't. And one of my favourite things about it is exactly what I referenced toward the start of the video, and that is the engine. A Golf R with a 2-litre motor may be faster. I'm sure it's more efficient, probably has better fuel economy as well. And generally speaking, most boy racers will probably want the newer one. To me, I don't even need to drive that newer car to know that I love the idea of this one more. It's kind of like the Audi RS6 situation. Yes, the newer V8 is faster, but come on, the older one has a V10. How can you not like that? This literally is the muscle car of hot hatches. An oversized engine, naturally aspirated, which is a relatively unique option in a world full of turbos, and it has so much effortless torque, especially in conjunction with the smaller frame and the lighter weight compared to most sports cars, that it just gives you so much accessibility to its performance. In terms of stuff like interior design, of course, it's not the level of car that I would usually talk about, so don't expect it to be like a Spiker or a Pagani inside, but I like the steering wheel design, I like the general space, as I said. In terms of the boy racer aspect of the interior, it's fairly minimal in terms of design, but it's definitely a sporty place to be. Overall though, as you can kind of tell, my praise for this car is glowing, and I have no doubt that some of these will be slightly lessened if it was a completely stock version, but to me that just highlights the kind of raw potential which it has. A stock version doubtless has better fuel economy than this one would, but again, this one shows what you can do with the Golf R32. Imagine buying one of those maybe lower mile or higher mile, lower price cars, and then doing some of these upgrades. Even on that kind of budget, you're getting almost as much for the money as, for instance, if you were to buy a used Maserati Gran Turismo, or even something like my Jag XKR. That's not a bad thing, in my opinion. But overall, that's it for my thoughts. Of course, if you are a current Golf R32 owner, maybe a Mark IV, but of course, especially a Mark V, or maybe you used to own one, or you're thinking about it, tell me your thoughts down below. If you have additional concerns that you believe potential owners should know about, drop that in the comments. Of course, check out, as I mentioned, my review for the Audi S3. Stick around for more hot hatch reviews in future, and if you want to see all of my other car reviews in this series, click the playlist on screen. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.